Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of this great day you are enjoying on your time zones. I can already see in the comments that we are from all over the world, and it is a sunny afternoon here in Switzerland, just the right context for our conversations. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co host for the next 2 hours. So, this conversation and the next one, we have Jessa with us, working her tech and logistics magic. And we will be discussing this hour about leading with heart, namely about emotional intelligence in HR leadership. We have an amazing lineup of speakers, and I will ask Jessa to bring them on the screen. And just as they pop up, I will continue to wholeheartedly welcome everybody in the audience. I do see that we travel all around the world with today's panel. That's always such a treat. And please, please, please consider the comments your conversation space and drop your ideas, your opinions, your own stories, your own takes on what it means to lead with heart. We always learn so much from our audience, and there are so many incredible nuances across geographies and our backgrounds, our journeys, and even our generations. So let's make the most out of our time here today. And we will, I think now we are complete. Wonderful. And we will spend a little bit shy of one full hour, just making sure that we allow time to roll over into the next conversation. Leading with heart. And you are all Hacking HR friends and panel veterans, so you know the drill. We will ease into the topic. I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen. And I will ask you firstly, just shortly introduce yourselves and do share with us what is the first thing that pops in your mind when you hear the expression leading with heart. It can be a word, it can be a feeling, it can be a short story of an experience, a lived experience. Anything goes. Jennifer, always a joy to have you in our conversations. Welcome.
Hi, Manola. How are you?
I'm so happy to see all of you here on the screen. Can you hear us?
Mhm.
Okay. So just a short introduction and what comes to mind when you hear leading with heart?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Jennifer Nash. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I'm an executive coach, management consultant, keynote speaker, and author of the book Be Human, Lead Human: How to Connect People and Performance. And Manola, when I hear leading with heart, I really think about the way that we can connect people to themselves, to their work, and to their organizations so that we can make the world a better place.
Thank you so very much. Jen, good to see you again. Welcome.
Nola, good to see you too. I'm Jen Jonas here in Phoenix, Arizona. And when I think of leading with heart, I think of putting the person first, a person first approach to leadership. And, there's so many business objectives, especially in HR. I think it's easy to get distracted by, rules, compliance, and business success and lose sight of why we are all here for, which is people who depend on the product, your service, your HR leadership. So I think it's thinking about who is this really for? It's for people.
Mm, wonderful. Thank you. Kim, welcome. Good to have you in this conversation with us.
Thank you, Manola. It's great to be here. Leading with heart, there's a number of aspects in it. And I think for me as a leader, well, I guess I should introduce myself. I am a head of talent management and actually kind of in between things right now. But I have been in HR for my entire career. I'm an executive on the side for talent management, and a lot that goes into the people-facing components of HR. So for me, leading with heart, I think the first word that pops in my head is empathy. Um, and it's way beyond that, but I think that the first thing that I try and do is take a different perspective, listening to the people, listening to the challenges, whether it's a large scale or individual, and try and look at things from a different perspective, the perspective of the people who we're engaged with.
Thank you. Raji, a joy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Manala. Sorry, I had problems getting in, but so glad to be with this wonderful group. For me, leading with the heart is empathy, of course. Kim kind of spoke it all out. But along with that, it's also making that human connection, for any issue or for any challenge, looking at it from a human angle and a human perspective, not looking at it as a piece of equipment. So that makes a whole mind shift in terms of how you approach the issue, how you try to solve it, if you focus on the human aspect.
Thank you. And Sandy, good to have you joining us. And we are at our signature intro round, and just a short introduction. And we are all sharing what is the first thing that comes to mind when we hear the expression leading with heart.
Hi, everyone. So sorry I'm late. As you guys know, in the human resources world, there's always unexpected things that come your way and that have to get solved right there and then. And you're like, but I have a meeting. Doesn't happen, right? It doesn't matter. So, so my name is Sandy. I've been doing HR for about 25 years now. And to me, what is leading with heart is putting the feelings out there, making yourself relatable, and being vulnerable, as well as accepting those that wear their hearts on their sleeves.
Thank you. Well, in this space today, we lead with heart and not with a watch. So so happy that we are now full house. I was very tempted to dive straight into the topic, but I would invite all of you, just let's take a couple of minutes and speak a little bit about emotional intelligence. What is the definition of emotional intelligence that we will carry forward in our conversation? Because it almost feels self-explanatory, yet with every conversation about this, we uncover different understandings, different meanings, different expectations, different levels of comfort with stepping into the space of emotional intelligence. So what is for you emotional intelligence? And also if you can share a few practical examples of how emotional intelligence shows up in the workplace. By now, I always do this. I move diagonally. So Kim, you will be our pioneer today. And then everybody just step in and build your conversation.
So I think for me, the first thought about emotional intelligence is really truly understanding your emotions, triggers, and how you respond to things, and how that impacts people. So I think in our roles as HR leaders, we have a unique perspective. We engage from, senior executive to CEO level, and then we also communicate and work with individual contributors, all of which have a different experience level and different engagement. We engage with them a little bit differently, and the messaging is different. So, we have. We're there when they get hired. We're there when we're training them, and unfortunately, also there when we're terminating them. And those are all different emotions. And obviously, the response that we get from those employees varies based on the messaging. So I think it's very important for us to really understand how we respond, how that impacts the people we're speaking with and engaging with, and how to kind of help others manage some of their responses.
Thank you, Kim. Now the unmuting competition is officially open. Raji.
Thank you. So this is my favorite topic. I always say this, emotional intelligence. I define it as, kind of the ability to observe, monitor, and be in control of your emotions, and what you say and what you do, even expressing the body language. How does it impact the other's emotions and their expressions? I think the second part is even more important than the part one. Sometimes we know exactly what to say, how to control our emotions, but things that we do triggers other people's emotions, and sometimes negatively. So, and it's actually sad that the last 25-30 years, we had the focus as emotional intelligence for leadership, and generally how we manage people and how we relate with people. But still, if you look at leadership research, emotional intelligence is the topic or the criteria for leadership that has the biggest gap. I've been doing leadership coaching for a living, and that's what I see as a gap when you have when you're helping a leader become his or her best. The thing that comes in the way, invariably, 9 out of 10, is the gap in the emotional intelligence. So it's something very near to my heart, and I haven't had an option to introduce myself. I'm Raji Ramanan, and been with Hacking HR ever since it began. I think Minola and me, we go a long way, and Enrique as well. And so happy to be back here. I recently joined a BPO, Everise, a global company, as their Senior Vice President of Corporate HR, focused on organizational design and talent management. So very happy to be here.
Thank you, Raji. Where do we go next? Sandy.
So I would say for me, it would be empathy, sympathy. Um, we making it a safe space for people to actually express themselves, how they feel, and to actually, even if you think that, perhaps they're being overly dramatic about a situation, or that they're exaggerating of, maybe the situation was this small, but in their eyes it was this big, or that's how hurt they feel, to not necessarily minimize or make them feel like what they have to say or what they are feeling, it's not valid. So creating a very safe space, I think, is also emotional intelligence, as well as, like I said, empathy and sympathy, understanding how, understanding their perspective. And then also, like Raji was saying, nonverbal communication goes a long way. And I am a big believer on that, and I love absorbing and just looking to see how, when you say something, how they react. And so I think just also being able to read between the lines when that nonverbal communication is being very verbal is part of emotional intelligence.
And now we have two contestants for the hot seat of going last. Let's see. Jen.
When I think of emotional intelligence, especially within HR, I think of the two concepts of self-management and self-awareness, self-management, and other awareness, other management, relationship management. And I've met leaders like Raji, who it's very, obvious that a lot of the relationship issues or performance issues are tied to a lack of emotional intelligence, usually self-awareness, but sometimes they have very high self-awareness, and it's more about how to foster relationships and how to be aware of other people's feelings. I like the phrase, and I forget where I heard it, but we like to think of ourselves as thinking creatures who sometimes feel, but we're actually feeling creatures who sometimes think. And I think that's really important, is learning how to connect with feelings in other people. A lot of the other, folks today have said empathy, and I think that is being able to connect with the feelings. But I've met a lot of leaders who won't even acknowledge their own feelings at work. There's been this stigma against having feelings, being a feeling creature at work, and the idea that when we come in the office doors, we shut it all down and we become these, machines that are incapable. And I think, unfortunately for HR, we get put in that box a lot of don't have feelings, don't show emotion, but we get faced with a lot of emotions. We do work with people through some of their most difficult times, through, or exciting times where there's positive emotion. My favorite is when people want to come talk about paternity and maternity leave, or talk about, something happening there, they're getting married, they need to change their benefits. And I think that we need to start having more conversations about feelings in HR. And without that, I think going into the deeper pools of emotional intelligence, what does it mean? How do we navigate it? We can't go there until we first acknowledge and destigmatize having feelings at work and being feeling creatures at work.
Jen, I love that. I think, so often we look at emotions as something that is fluffy or something that is woo-woo, right? And it has no place in the workplace. But yet emotions are actually data points for us, right? When we look at the 4 domains of emotional intelligence, there's actually 12 different competencies that make up emotional intelligence. And I believe, Raji, you were talking about how, Goleman had introduced this idea of when they studied star performers in the workplace, 90% of the difference of their performance was attributed to emotionally intelligent qualities. And we know from prior research that the key characteristic of an effective leader is empathy, like Kim was saying. So I think there's a huge place and opportunity for emotional intelligence to become even closer to the forefront than it is today. I think everyone on the panel has probably heard the story of Kite Baby, the CEO who fired an employee for asking to work remotely while their baby was in the NICU. And they posted a TikTok video that had a scripted apology, and she got excoriated on social media because of this lack of empathy that she showed to this employee. And she has since posted a second TikTok video where she goes unscripted and actually talks about how, I really didn't put myself in that person's shoes. And as a female CEO and as a parent, I really missed the mark on that. And so demonstrating that she did have some emotional intelligence in that space upon reflection, I think is an important opportunity that a lot of leaders could learn from.
And I think you bring in a good point, Jen. I work for engineering companies a big part of my life, and there was a Harvard research that once showed that engineering skills and emotional intelligence are diagonally opposite. And when my CEO asked me, why is it that we have such a big gap in this EQ, which we had at that point of time declared as one of the leadership competencies that we will monitor and develop in people. Luckily, EQ is something you can develop. I showed him this research, and everybody, the senior leadership team, absolutely freaked out because they're all a bunch of engineers. And it was a big aha moment for us, and we started focusing on that. But I want to share a recent experience I had. Like many of you know, Minole, apart from my big professional achievement that I'm proud of, I'm also proud of a personal achievement, which is I have 2 grandkids under 2. So I really enjoy them. That's how I moved to the West Coast recently. And I was just letting my younger grandson, he's just 3 months old, and I was telling him, oh, baby, don't cry, because he was crying. And I was trying to console him, saying, don't cry. And my daughter stepped in and she said, Mom, please don't tell him don't cry. Let him express his feelings. Because when you say this now, he will register this in his entire life. He will feel that he should not cry. And crying is not something that he shouldn't do. I want him to cry. I want him to express his feelings. I had such an aha moment at that time. You think that you're doing something great by telling someone not to cry, not to express themselves. And that is not empathy. So, big learning that I want to share with this audience, whether it's a 3-month-old or a 30-year-old, expressing feelings is absolutely okay. And I think as HR, we have a big role to shape the culture of the organization where sharing feelings is okay and being comfortable with crying or, sometimes yelling is absolutely okay. We need to make it under control. But if that's the way someone is expressing their feelings, you give room for that. You create avenues to do it in the meaningful, appropriate way, but still encourage that. We don't want angry people yelling in the workplace, but have a forum or a platform for them to express themselves and make everybody feel okay about it.
Thank you so very much, Raji, for sharing this story, and thank you everyone for your answers. I was thinking about how to word my next question. So please bear in mind, I'm not a native speaker. I hope I can get away with a little bit of a space and grace. Some people say emotional intelligence is a skill. I loved how we referred to it as a characteristic. Now, I don't want to go into a debate whether it's a skill in and of itself, whether it's a characteristic underpinned by other skills. But Raji, the story that you shared made me think of how storytelling is a big part of leading with heart. And I would ask all of you if you can think of skills that speak to leading with heart. What are some of the skills that you think help people to lead with heart? And there are extra points available for skills that are not within the circle of the usual suspects. Is there something that is particularly meaningful and people don't necessarily immediately associate it with leading with heart and or emotional intelligence? And Jennifer, since you prompted this question, I will ask you to lead us into this.
Okay, sure. So, yeah, I think it's a great question. One of the skills that would come to mind for me is the ability to help people feel seen as an emotionally intelligent skill. So I will give you a quick example. So in the book that I just wrote, Be Human, Lead Human, which is back here on the slide, I tell the story of how Alan Mulally was CEO at Ford Motor Company. And I was working there at the time, and I decided to give him like an appreciation certificate. And so I sent that to him, and I never thought that I would hear anything, back. Well, I actually got a phone call from him. He left a voicemail on my answering machine. And he also sent me this big package of swag. And in the package of swag, there was this letter that he had handwritten, and he had put a heart around my name. Now, I don't know about you guys, but like, I have never seen a CEO do something like that, And in the letter, he told me like, he appreciated what I was doing for the company, and he appreciated who I was as a human being. And I think, just that simple act of taking the time to write me a handwritten letter and tell me that he appreciated me, it helped me feel seen. And it helped me understand that I was bringing value to the company, not just for the contributions that I could share, but for, just myself as a human being, being there, and existing in this world.
Kim.
Yeah, so I also have kind of a personal story. It's a little bit different, but in my previous role, I led the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, program. And we were getting our ERGs going and active. And one that's very close to my heart is around mental health, mental health. So we had a discussion that was focused on that. I think we were doing that during May. So we were trying to make sure that we had regular ongoing discussions, training, things like that, to really focus on mental health for that month. And so our panel discussion that we were holding was specifically around some challenges about how people show up and how, you've got all these things going on behind you and you still show up to work, and you're trying to balance these things and trying to be understanding that we don't always know what's going on. And I say it behind us because we're all in this virtual world now. So, we're here, and I shared my personal story, and I'll share just very briefly here is my son has bipolar and some addiction issues. And at that time, especially, we were going through a very challenging time with him. And he was just having a really difficult time. And I shared that story, and I actually got very emotional and teared up. And, that wasn't the intention. But through that, I got so many people responding to me, just writing, connecting with me, because I tend to be fairly stoic and even keeled. And being on a company-wide discussion about mental health and sharing my story, and also being emotional, created that sense of a safe space and trust. And my being vulnerable actually opened up a number of people to also share their stories. So I think that, sometimes it's understanding that us being vulnerable is also impactful.
I completely agree with you, Kim. And I think it helps to create a safe space, right? Because if someone at this level is willing to share their story, is willing to share what their struggles are, it just goes to show us, that it's a safe space for them to also be like, you know what? Well, this is what I'm dealing with. Like, can you help me? Or do you know somebody? And I can guarantee you that people that, because I'm one of those that completely understands the whole bipolar thing. And, I had a cousin, she actually passed away last year, but, we dealt with her bipolar condition and schizophrenic condition for so many years that, you put yourself in the kid's shoes, right? And it's kind of that same scenario that can actually happen in the workplace, right? They can be dealing, like what you said, Kim, you don't know what's going on behind, right? Because everything's virtual right now and all that stuff. And so being able to actually help them know that it's okay for them to not be okay, and that they're not alone. And I think that's one big factor of emotional intelligence, making sure that they know and that they are accepted and that they're not alone and that there's help out there. And that if we are relatable, we can all find some sort of solution to get to a place where we understand and we can meet them halfway, right? I mean, if somebody comes to us and tells us like, hey, I'm dealing with this, or even I'll give you guys a perfect example. I have a 3-year-old and my kiddo's autistic, right? And so, and I know somebody was talking about neurodivergent in the comments. And so autism is part of that, right? And so with autism, sometimes we have amazing days, right? And sometimes we can go to the store and it's a full-blown meltdown. And sometimes you don't know what to expect, right? So you try to be prepared as a parent. But, sometimes if you yourself are struggling that day, it's not as easy, So when you have your wins, when you have a day, like perfect example yesterday, we went to the bank. We were opening up an account for my husband. We were opening up an account for me. And the fact that, he struggled slightly, but at the end of the day, what made me feel very reassured, and I never told the teller this, she says, buddy, you did such an amazing job being here for an hour. So that just made me feel he was accepted. The behavior, his ups, even though there were very little ups, where he was like a little crazy, and then some downs, like they were accepted. So I think just building that space to where like Kim was talking about, and just being able to actually show acceptance is very, very key with emotional intelligence.
Beautiful stories. Quite hard to follow. So thank you, Jen.
I just had a comment to
Oh,
what Jen and Sandy were talking about, if that's okay, Minola. I heard vulnerability being brought up few times. I just want to share this story, which I think is very powerful for organizations to think about, to inculcate empathetic, and it's okay for things to go wrong culture, so that people feel safe, and that I think is the most important thing, leading with the heart, to make people feel safe and belonged. So this organization, no mistakes were allowed. You have to be pitch perfect, and everything had to be organized, planned. And it became an organization which was highly risk averse, and in the competitive environment we gotten into, we had to take risks, we had to go after new products, new markets. And it was a failed attempt that we made trying to do that, because the innate culture was, oh, you have to get everything right, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed. Have you ever heard of 257th version of a document? I have, in this organization. So this is the background I'm explaining, because it's very important. This came in the way of our trying to be successful in our next iteration of success journey, that it was felt by everybody that we need to do something about it. And the best thing that the leadership did was to do some course correction. Hey, we created this monster of you can never go wrong. It's not okay to make a mistake. Vulnerability is a crime, kind of a culture. We need to change it. And what we did was, right from new employee orientation to leadership development, every meeting, group of people that we meet, there's always a story told about, and it's a French company, you see, so I apologize for using a French word. What did you F up? Boldly the topic was, what did I F up? So people would come and share stories, leaders would come and share the stories of what did they screw up and how did they feel about it, and overcoming it, learning from it, what did they do, became a culture that it's okay to make a mistake and you don't have to feel that you have committed a crime or a sin. I can't tell you how much in 2-3 years the entire DNA of the company changed, and we were successful in our journey. Absolutely, I would owe it to having this whole vulnerability demonstrated and making people feel comfortable about vulnerability. Sorry, I was so compelled to share the story.
thank you, Raji, and thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I love that story, Raji. I think it's a really important point where you're looking at a company that depends on a high level of innovation, but very low psychological safety. And I heard something the other day where they were saying that a company identified two of their core values as innovation and efficiency. And they were saying, absolutely not. Innovation is not efficient. Innovation is sloppy. It's messy. It takes up time that we could be spending doing other things. You're not creative. You're not innovative if you are efficient, if you are safe. And so I think helping leaders understand that dichotomy. But in your question, Manal, about what a skill is, it might not always be attributed to emotional intelligence. I think of one of my favorite moments from one of my favorite shows from Ted Lasso when he talks about curiosity. And I think curiosity for me has been the door that I was able to step into from self-awareness into other awareness, in suspending judgment and really just staying curious a little bit longer and questioning my own perspective of why a person might show up the way they do. I used to be an extremely judgmental person. When I first became a leader, I knew all the answers. And as I've gotten older, what I've learned about leadership is the more I know, the more I don't know. And the longer I wait to judge or to say I understand, the more I find out and the more I discover, and usually discover that I was wrong. in my initial assessment or judgment of that situation. So I also really loved what Cindy was saying about just acceptance. I think when we stay curious, when we suspend judgment, especially in the HR space, we have first of all, it looks more like acceptance. People feel like I really want to understand you. This is important. And I'm asking good questions and I'm listening intently, but they also, at the end of it, you do find more acceptance. Empathy is easier because I have waited to really understand and I've sat in your shoes trying to understand what it looks like from your perspective. So no, I can say, I do understand and I'm with you in this space rather than standing apart, which is what we do when we're in judgment. So I think curiosity and suspending judgment is absolutely critical for emotional intelligence.
Yeah. I see by the nodding that you have +1 from everyone, and I'm sure even from the audience on curiosity. Thank you, Jen. Who do we have left for this round? Jennifer, Kim, would you like to add anything? Any skills that pop to mind?
Well, there's a question from Shelly Ann in the comments about, I guess, getting played. And, there is always that risk that, somebody tries to connect using, vulnerability. I think that that's also where we have to balance, and it's the emotional intelligence aspect of it. So if we as HR folks and leaders have to balance the business and the employees always. So we want to create and lead with heart, lead with empathy. We want to make sure employees feel valued and heard, and there's a safe space and we're understanding. But there is the part where it depends on where they're going. If they want to have a conversation, then you are having a conversation. It's a safe space. If they're continuing, if you're feeling like you're being played, they're asking and pushing for things, which is where we start to get into the business need versus, what we can do. So we can create that space. We can better understand. We can feel valued, help them feel valued and heard. We create that, healthy workplace. But, should somebody opt to try and take advantage of that, then we have things that, guardrails there to help us navigate that as well.
Thank you so very much, Kim, for picking that comment, because I wanted to build on that for the next question. We are already quite a handful of minutes into the second half of our time today. And I wanted to bring the conversation back into the space that we created with the January series. This is a space for HR. We talked so much about how HR shows up for everybody else in the organization, but this is our space for ourselves. So my next question to all of you would be, what does an HR leader with a high emotional intelligence do differently? How do they show up differently? How do they sound differently? How do they feel differently? And I will just leave that question there, and let's see where inspiration strikes.
I would say lead by example. We were talking about in one of the other panels, the practice what you preach, right? So I think that's a big factor. You don't just say it. You don't just tell them like, well, here's my advice to you, but you're not following that same advice. So I think that's one big key factor where they actually do practice what they preach. And I think that they do actually provide examples, and they don't just say, do this. It's, here's what I've experienced. This might work for you, but let's do this. Let me find you some resources, or here's a number where you can call to find these type of resources. So I think one big thing would also be just, not just leaving the conversation there. It's also helping them providing them with resources, and sometimes just someone needs a ear, to vent. And I'll give you an example. We have here an employee where I work at where this was her husband's dream, right? To go into and being a cop. And so he was finally finishing school, but the schedule that he got in the area that he was going to be in was going to be a very, very dangerous area, or that he's in, I should say. And but she was struggling with it because now the way the shifts work, she wasn't going to be able to actually, see him as much. And she was concerned that the marriage was going to fail and all that stuff, right? And she just came in, one time, and I was like, you look a little down. What's going on? And she's like, well, can I tell you? She's like, you're not going to judge me, right? And I was like, no, come in, And so we sat, she talked, she cried, but she got it all out, right? And she cracks me up because she'll come and tell me, she's like, do you have time for a session? Like, I need to have a session with you where I just say, and one of the key things that she told me was, for the very first time, we haven't had an HR person in here that is actually willing to just hear us out. And so to me, I was like, I know I'm doing something right. So listening to them, helping them with cases where you maybe perhaps have experienced something similar, giving them those examples and actually helping them find resources, I think is one of the big differences when an HR leader leads with with their heart or emotional intelligence.
Kim, I see you unmuted, and I see Jen. I know we had Raji lined up, so it's Raji, Kim, Jen.
Thank you. Sandy, I think you brought in a great point of being available for people. I think making the time and being approachable. It's so funny when I joined as VP HR of this tech company, and I'm sure we know, right? Tech companies, everybody's working remote. People don't even see each other. They don't even know who the HR person is. In contrast, so I'm spending a lot of time getting to know people, and there's a big lineup in my office, in front of my office. And CEO said, are you having a lot of employee relations issues? Why are there people lined up in front of your office? I said, no, people are wanting to just fly things by me and get my suggestions. And some of them are just come to sit and just vent, So they're all taking turns. And some of them I said, hey, hang in there, let's grab lunch and I'll come and get you in your office. So it's changed the whole culture of the organization in terms of being able to express themselves. And there is somebody, particularly in HR, who is available to talk and who is not threatening, who is giving us the confidence. The confidentiality will be maintained. And I jokingly say this, in HR, everything is confidential unless otherwise, So I had that rule established right from day one, and it really eased out the pressure. It was a high pressure, high stress working environment where we were on a growth trajectory, and we were doubling our revenue every year. That was a mandate from the investors, and that was how the company was going, the speed and pace at which it was going. And at that speed and pace, obviously, there's a lot of things perturbed. There's a lot of things that are hyped up, and people get burnt out. And it was very helpful for people. And I would say the two skills, just to underline, which I learned from that experience was, first of all, just be available. I don't think people expect you to do even anything. In most cases, just being able to talk and voice themselves out. And then secondly, of course, empathy to understand where they are coming from. And thirdly, most importantly, being approachable. You don't even have to create or offer solutions. But even if you can, the empathy and the listening comes in first, I guess.
Thank you, Raji. Kim.
Well, yeah, I would agree, Raji, with your points. I think I want to take a perspective of, we're talking about HR for HR, and I think taking time for your own team, taking time to relate and their perspective. So many of us, I can hear, and I've had the same thing where it almost feels like we're a therapist in some way. We're there to listen. People come in and share. They're not looking for solutions. And I saw a comment in here about, listening with the intent to understand instead of, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, is important. And one of the things that we also do in HR is as I touched on earlier, is we navigate the entire employee journey. So there's all those moments that matter. But that can be taxing on us as HR folks because we're showing up in each way, each place, positive and energetic when we're bringing them on, or, whether it's coaching conversations, it's helping managers, it's dealing with performance issues, it's, so we have this whole thing. And at the end of the day, we tend to be, the ones who don't get the focus. And so trying to take the time as, HR leadership or peers is connecting and understanding that change management can be difficult. I know many of us have either just experienced being laid off or have laid off folks, especially this month. I see it active, very active right now. Understanding that, it takes a toll on all of us, regardless of what chair you're sitting in, and making sure that you show up and have that same empathy and safe space for your team, for your peers to kind of vent. When you're telling folks that their job is going away, there's a multitude of responses, and sometimes there's a lot of getting beat up. And so you want to create that space to be empathetic there as well.
Jen.
Well said, Kim. In thinking about the few leaders I've had that really inspired me, and not all of them were HR leaders, but I think a commonality between them is they served. They served their teams, they served the employees, they saw themselves not in a position of power, but in a position of service. And I think to me, that will always be the hallmark of a highly emotionally intelligent HR leader. And I think about actually a COO that I served under before I was even in HR, who, it was not uncommon to see her taking out the trash if it was full, or, picking up after a meeting, helping put the food away, things like that really resonated with me because it was that wholehearted act of service and nothing was beneath her. And I think in order to be empathetic, in order to meet people where they're at, in order to be people first, you have to kind of see yourself as serving the employees. Something that I love the most about the HR that I get to do, I work in nonprofit health and human services, is I get to serve this amazing workforce that have dedicated their lives to helping people, some of the most vulnerable people in society. So I see myself in service of our purpose, our mission, by serving the workforce. And I think that that's really important. And all of the really inspirational leaders I've ever known have had that same kind of habit of service.
Jennifer.
Yeah, so I think in terms of, what do HR leaders do that differentiates them, right, when they're using emotional intelligence? We've touched on a few of those things so far. And I think one of the common themes that I'm hearing across everyone is that, as we look at the role of an HR leader, right, the role is actually evolving to become more of a coach and a facilitator rather than, a command and control or issuing orders or, telling people what to do. And I think one of the key competencies in that space is the ability for the HR leader to prioritize the person over the process, right? To prioritize the person over the procedure, to prioritize the person over profitability or the product. I think the second key thing is, looking at how leaders' roles are evolving to be coaches and facilitators, using those coaching competencies to lead, right? Holding space for people, right? As one of our other panelists mentioned, people just come in and vent, right? I think it was Raji, I had a line out the door waiting for people to just come in and listen to them, right? Not being judgmental, right? There was another person on the panel who mentioned that. And I think the third thing is like Jen was saying, like, as a leader, you're in a role of service. And so how are you there to support and encourage the growth and evolution and development of the people that you are leading and have the privilege to serve?
We are sadly, and this is very painful to say, we're 7 minutes away from wrapping this conversation up. But I would ask your help. Let's park 2 minutes for the punchline mic drop wrap up round. I just got an idea listening to you over the past minutes. And Jennifer, I hope it's not my misperception. You were very gracious and you are our champion on going last on this panel. So I will invite you to lead us into this slice of the conversation because I know it's something very near and dear to your heart. Mm-hmm. When we talk about leading with heart, and we talked about how part of that is meeting people where they are. If we look at our organizational environments, how can we showcase the impact that leading with heart has on business outcomes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Manola, I think that's a fantastic question. And I'm sure that everyone that is listening and watching this today is thinking, well, yeah, this is great, right? Let's have emotional intelligence. Let's be servants. Let's, use coach competencies. Let's, make sure that we're listening to people and helping them feel heard. But at the end of the day, how does that translate into business outcomes? And I think it's critical to look at the fact that when you do have organizations who have leaders who lead in this way, with HR leaders who are role modeling these behaviors, you have outstanding results that happen. So if you take a look, for example, at Texas Roadhouse, right, during the pandemic, Texas Roadhouse decided that they were not going to lay off anyone during the pandemic. And not only did they not go out of business, like 40% of other restaurants in the US during that time, they actually hired people. They sent out $15 million in Texas Roadhouse stimulus checks to help their employees if they needed financial assistance. The executive team and the leadership team gave up their salaries and their bonuses so that every employee in the organization could have 1 week paid vacation. Now, if you look at the growth of Texas Roadhouse and you look at where they are today compared to where they were before the pandemic, they have grown double-digit growth. I'll give you a second example. If you look at Ford Motor Company, when Alan Mulally came in and took over the company to save them from essentially going out of business, Alan had a $17 billion loss when he came into office. And 7 years later, when he retired, the stock price had gone up 1,837% because he was using principles and practices of human leadership and of emotional intelligence. So I would offer that to people who are watching and listening. When you think that this doesn't matter, it does matter. And it impacts the top and bottom line, and it impacts customer acquisition.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. If any other panelists would like to build, we can take some time because I think it's quite an important message from the panel. Kim, I see you unmuted, please.
Well, so if to kind of sum it up is if you have an environment where leaders are showing emotional intelligence and understanding how their responses impact others and understanding how people's responses may vary, you create that safe space. Psychological safety is key. And you improve the employee engagement and satisfaction. They're feeling like they're in a healthy, supported place. They can trust how things are going to, how responses are. They have this place that they can come and being their whole self. They are here and they're there to really bring their best self. And when they feel heard and they feel understood, that goes a long way. I've certainly worked in environments where, I used to tell my boss, I can tell when the executive leadership team is all in a meeting, because we're all getting messages, instant messages asking, and it's that finger pointing. Previous, worked at a place where it was, collaborative, and that there was a lot of safe space there, and we were innovative, and the company grew from 350 people to 3,500 people, and we had great leadership who really understood and had a personal perspective and valued emotional intelligence, and that was part of the executive leadership team. So the other company is having some challenges. The first company is doing much better, and I've lived at both perspectives and can see what, when you feel safe, when you feel engaged, you are going to go above and beyond.
Thank you so much. We are slowly running out of time. I'm not ready to give up on the wrap-up round, but Sandy, Raji, Jen, if you just want to highlight something or just add on to what was being said, please. Jen.
I think that Kim and Dr. Jennifer both put it excellently. But I think of that adage, people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. And I think that alone, with what we know about, at least in my area, the workforce and how expensive hiring is, how much resources companies put into retention, that alone, I think, is a really important aspect of why this is so important. And it does come from HR. If you have an HR leader who lacks emotional intelligence, that is going to ripple effect, and it's going to cause them to not question the emotional intelligence of the other leaders in the organization, which is their role. Leadership development is their role. They're going to focus on the wrong things. They're going to make some decisions. I've seen it where they let people go when really it should maybe be the other direction that they're looking. I think that having emotional intelligence pays dividends in just the retention of good employees. And I think right now we are seeing a lot more people spending a lot less time in each job. And we're also seeing this younger generation come into the workforce tolerating a lot less abuse than maybe previous generations did. So I think ultimately retention absolutely demands that we take a hard look at leadership skills. And I think emotional intelligence is an excellent place to start for anybody who's considering that retention question.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Raji, I see you unmuted. You want to add something, right?
Yes, I was just thinking that, and the role of HR is something phenomenal in this topic. Having leading with the heart as the background of any agenda that happens in an organization is purely the privilege of the HR folks, and make it something real for the HR team as well. I've seen HR leaders, they're so good with the other leaders, but they are absolutely merciless with their own teams. So my appeal to HR colleagues would be nice to your own self and to your team, and be the role model in being understanding, empathetic, and create that culture.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And let's quickly wrap it up. My last ask from all of you in this conversation is, as we still sit in its energy, what is one word that you want to leave our audience with that speaks to leading with heart? One word. I will give you a few seconds to think about. I will just say thank you to everybody in the audience. Please do check the recording of this conversation either on our hackinghrlab.io platform or in our LinkedIn space. And if anyone asks you at any moment about the business case for leading with heart, just send them this link, and it will go a long way. Now, one word for leading with heart, and we will do counterclockwise. That means, Raji, you go first. One word.
For me, the most important thing is being real. Be in touch with the reality here and now.
Thank you so much. Sandy.
Walk the walk, or talk the talk, walk the walk.
Thank you. Kim.
One word, self-awareness.
Wonderful. Jen.
Curiosity.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Results.
Thank you all so very much. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you for the people in the audience. If you just joined or if you're rolling over, just give us a couple of minutes so that we can restock on water, and we will be right here with you. Thank you, everybody.
Great job, team.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah, Minola. Awesome facilitation as always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Manola. It was so nice to meet everybody.
Yeah, let's connect on LinkedIn.
I would love that.
Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of the day you are enjoying on your time zones. Welcome to everybody who just joined. Welcome back to everybody in the audience who rolled over from the previous conversation. This is day 7 of our January series, and this is our space for ourselves. We talked so much in all our conversations before January about how HR shows up for their organizations. And this is the space where we just show up for ourselves. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour or so. Jessa is with us backstage, taking care of logistics and tech and making sure that we will enjoy this experience seamlessly. I do see people joining in the comments. If I can just ask for your help, just drop us a couple of notes just where you're listening or watching from. First, it makes us travel around the world vicariously. And second, it does tell us that we're not stuck in some strange back loop in the internet and LinkedIn. And then, Jessa, if you can help me, please bring the speakers on stage. We couldn't have dreamed of a better panel for this topic. We will be speaking today about the mindful HR leader, about strategies for present and impactful leadership. Now, I would invite everybody in the audience to be present in this conversation just as much as our speakers, and do drop your opinions, your ideas, your own experiences, and help us learn even more from one another. Now, what we will do, you know the drill. I will pass the mic around as you appear on my screen. I will ask you to kindly, shortly introduce yourselves. And I was thinking how to kick us off with what question. So here's my confession. When I saw the title of the panel, there were two things that immediately popped in my mind. One is something that pretty much became my mantra, and I learned it from a very, very meaningful friend of mine, and that is be present over perfect. You probably saw it in my emails to you or in previous conversations. And the second one is a quote about leadership that goes, good leaders are like thermometers, and great leaders are like thermostats. So my first question to you, in addition to your short introduction, what was the first thing that popped in your mind when you saw the title of the panel today? Christine, welcome. It's so good to see you.
Hello. My name is Kristen Strunk, and I am a human resources professional with about 30 years of experience. And I would have to say that the first thing that popped into my mind when I saw the title of this panel was, boy, I hope I can learn a lot from everybody else who's participating. I think that this is a great opportunity for us to take a pause and remind ourselves how to be present and to share some really good ideas around that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christine. Tammy, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me back. Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Chapik. I am the CEO and founder of a company called We Inspire We, which is based on executive leadership development and leadership development for authentic leaders. And when I saw this title, I was reminded back to the moment when I realized that my presence was more powerful than I realized. And that when I was in meetings and multitasking like we do, what message that was sending to the people around me, and just how powerful your focus and attention can really be for yourself and for others.
Thank you, Tammy. Jen, welcome. It's great to have you on my screen.
Thanks for having me. So good to see you, Manola. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Casimiro. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Profit. I'm calling in from the Bay Area, which is unceded Ohlone land. To answer your question, when I saw the title, I honestly thought, what does that look like that we have to call out what a mindful HR leader is versus a not mindful HR leader? And I think that's really important, and why I think this conversation is really important, to point out that there is a difference, and how you show up needs to be intentional around that.
Thank you. Tamika, I so knew you would be in this panel.
Hi, Manola. How are you? It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Good to see all of you.
Yes. I am Tamika Hill Thomas. I am currently a senior principal at Mercer, and I've been doing people analytics for about 10 years now, and I'm really, really just very passionate about this topic. When I first saw this title, honestly, I just started thinking about my own personal experiences. I wanted to share stories of great leaders I had and how they propelled my career. I've also had experiences with bad leaders and how they kind of stalled my career. And I just really am hoping through this 1 hour discussion to share my knowledge and share what I've learned, share how I taken my personal experience, how I try to be a better leader. And I'm just hoping that through this conversation, people can really, I think, relate to some of the stories I've said, but also just learn from other people's experience, things that they can do to help improve their own selves and be more present and an impactful leader.
Thank you. And last but not least, I think the January series is one of my favorites so far because, Rod, I think this is the most frequent we shared conversations until now. Well, let's see how Rod's connection.
I seem to be having
decides to
audio
help us
challenges.
We could hear you for a little bit.
Yeah, I need to be
there.
modest from a stand is the I'm a yoga
Rod,
instructor.
you're coming. You're
in the
coming.
different hats.
Rod, we hear you, but it's quite hiccupy. I don't know if it's just me or if it's the connection. Let's see if we can.
Sorry. I might need to work on my computer. I think it's the connection.
Yeah, the joys of connections. Maybe Rod, what? Okay, let's give it a go. Does it work now?
Change it. I'm just going to change my Wi-Fi. Sorry.
Okay, so let's do like this. We will give you a few minutes just to fix this one up. If you can rejoin, maybe that will also help. And then we will loop you back into the conversation and we will give you space for the first round of intro and what popped on your mind, if that works with everybody. Yeah? Great. Now, I really loved how, I think, Tammy, you were the first one to call it out. The meaning and impact of our presence. So I would love you to be our pioneer into the next round. What does our presence mean? And I love the element of intentionality that Jen weaved in there. So what does our presence mean as a leader?
So many things. And I don't think we always realize how our energy or attitude kind of pulls through with our presence. I think we all think we're better actresses and actors than we really are, but presence is such a gift for ourselves and for others. And I think that's the word I'd like to hook to is gift. As a leader, when you are fully present with the people around you, they feel valued, they feel cared for, they feel invested in. And that's really the number one big thing that we need to do as leaders is make our people feel valued and contributed to. That presence also is a gift back to ourselves, right? Because then we're deepening our relationships. We're picking up cues that we might not have otherwise. We're learning, we're intuiting all the fun things, right? So I think that if I had to sum up, again, what presence as a leader is in one word, it would be a gift.
Thank you. Well, now the unmuting competition is officially open. So please jump in and build your conversation. Let's see who has the quickest finger. Jen.
I'm happy to chime in here. Just to build off what Tammy said, I think presence, and when we think about leadership presence too, and going back to what I named earlier around intentionality, so much of presence is built on self-awareness, because if you are not self-aware, then you cannot be aware of the context, you cannot be aware of your emotions, and you cannot recognize the different ways that people are coming into a space. So I think that presence is really thinking about, first and foremost, how in tune with yourself are you? Because like Tammy said, people notice, especially if you serve in a leadership capacity, when you are not present, when you are thinking about the future and you're anxious and you're worried about a timeline, or if you are thinking about something that happened in the past and you're holding that anxiety, people can notice that. And so I think presence is really about the intentional ways in which you're in tune with yourself, so that you can therefore be best in service of the teams and the people that you're working with.
So great. I see Kristen.
And I think that self-awareness, to carry through with that theme, is really one of the things that we can role model for others as well. And in this impactful leadership conversation, even just knowing yourself well enough to know when you do need to take a break or you do need to step away for a minute so that you can come back in the right frame of mind with the right level of intentionality and attention is really very important. And I don't think there's anything shameful or harmful in telling someone that you'll be back in a minute, whether it's virtually, whether it's in person, being able to say, I'm just going to take a minute, grab a glass of water, take a deep breath, I'll be back, can actually be very good for the person that you're talking to, so they know that you're coming in fully tuned into them.
I would just like to add, when you asked that question, I was thinking it from the perspective of not the leader, but from the team members on there. What is it like to have a leader who is not present, who is not empathful, and the detriment that can do to the performance of the team, to the project, to everything that is there? I feel that just being a present leader, being an empathful leader, means that you're there to listen. You're there being a provider of knowledge. You're there to make sure things are coming along. You're there for your team. And your just mere presence on that team is enough to inspire the team to move forward on that. So it's not just about, and I agree, it's about, being self-aware and taking the space, but it also means that you have to understand your team is also looking at you as well for inspiration. So not only if you're not present are you letting yourself down, you're letting everybody around you down as a result.
How wonderful. I see in the comments, the audience started to talk about mindfulness. And I would just like to take a few minutes and really look at what mindfulness, for the purpose of this conversation, what do we mean by mindfulness? I see around me people having different relationships with a word, whether with the word itself and what it means and what it stands for, oftentimes with its timeliness and relevance within our workplace, struggling to accurately read the appetite for talking about mindfulness within our workplaces. So how do you talk about mindfulness in the workplace, and why being a mindful leader is so critical? We started to touch a little bit on this, but I would really like to go a little bit deeper. And I see we lost two panelists. Well, let's see. Let's just move the conversation and then we will welcome them back, and we go agile, not fragile on this one. Tomika, I see you unmuted, please.
So I missed a little bit part of that question. I went out for a little bit, but I think you want to talk about mindfulness and what does that mean directly?
Exactly. Okay. What does mindfulness mean in the workplace? And why is being a mindful leader so important through the lens of how we define mindfulness?
Yes. I thought that was the question. I just wanted to verify. So with mindfulness, I think, first of all, let's not forget that just a few years ago, we were going through a pandemic that was causing a lot of stress with people. Being mindful of your own personal situation, as well as being thoughtful of the mindfulness of your other colleagues, I think was become a very top priority for a lot of employers at this time, because a lot of people were going through a lot of stress, and that level of stress was impacting the work. I think it's important when we're talking about mindfulness and health and presence, it's not just some soft, fuzzy thing that's out there. It does impact the performance of the company. It does impact the performance of the work that is being done. And I do feel truly that if we have better conversations about mindfulness and how people can be better health-wise, mentally, spiritually, how that in turn can be a positive asset for the company so that they can perform better is one of the things that I think we have to continue to drive and communicate. People are important to the business. How they feel, how they perform is important to the business. We're not just widgets. We're not just a machine that we can just easily replace when it gets old. But just like machines, we need to have checkups. We have to be healthy. And I think it's very important for companies to start thinking about that at pretty much at all times. How can our people, just like our machines, running smoothly, are healthy, and are getting what they need so that as a company, we can be productive and meet our own business demand.
Thank you, Tamika. Jen.
So to answer your first question, because this was something that around how do we define mindfulness? And then I'll answer kind of that second part around like, why is mindful leadership important? So I wanted to bring a very specific definition because I think that it's important for us to have like shared language around how we are talking about this topic. So a particular definition that I like around mindfulness is from the Mindful Life Project, which is a nonprofit. And it says that mindfulness creates a deep awareness of seeing life experiences through a non-judgmental lens, where individuals can notice emotions, thoughts, physical sensations, and all of life's experiences in a healthy, non-reactive way. And so the reason why I like this definition is because these things around being not judgmental, being aware of your triggers, who you are, and so that you're not reactive to the spaces and the people that you're in, that will result in a projection that you have to other people. So why I think this is important specifically for leaders, and even more specifically for HR leaders, is that HR people leaders, oftentimes we are navigating the things that are not so great. People are coming to us around, that's bad, there's something wrong here. In particular, I'm a DEI professional, and so people are coming to me around, this space is not safe, this is inequitable, all of these things. And so as HR leaders, why mindful leadership is important is because when we are mindful in our leadership, then we limit the opportunities for us to project our pains, our triggers, are the things that make us upset onto the people that we are serving. We all stepped into this capacity in service, right? We're people, we're people leaders. There may be times where we joke that we're tired of people because we chose this as our job. But to be mindful allows for us to be in tune again with ourselves, so that in the moments where we have a reaction, we're triggered, we get upset at something, we don't project that and take that out on our team, on the leaders that we are working really closely with, on the executives that we're working closely with. Mindful leadership allows for us to recognize those moments, those triggers, to process that in the moment, and then get back to the present moment of how we're trying to show up as a leader in whatever way that we're trying to do that, whether that's on a project or it's in facilitation or it's, having a one-on-one conversation. And I think that's why mindful leadership is really key for any HR leader who wants to step into this capacity and really be successful in this capacity.
Wonderful. Tammy.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot to add. I think those are really great definitions of kind of thinking through mindfulness. I would say that part of it is certainly that awareness of where am I today? How do I want to be showing up? What's happening in this moment? I think it ties directly to presence, right? So being present in the moment, being fully intentional. And I think, like I said, the word intention always comes to mind when I think of mindfulness too, right? Like, what do I want to be exuding? What do I want to have happen in this moment? How do I want to show up in this moment? And I think those things all really come together when it comes to mindfulness, because it's not, fly by the seat of your pants, right? There's some thought that goes into it. So awareness and intention kind of maybe coming together.
Thank you. Rod, it's so good to see you back.
Good to be back. Hopefully you can hear me okay this time.
Yes.
Working all right? All right. Maybe I'll answer the first question as well before. Is that, I'm Rod Hutchings. Rod Hutchings, been in the Air Force for 40 years, just about this year, actually. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm a high performance coach as well in volleyball. And why is mindfulness, or what's mindfulness? I think it was answered very well just before. I think it's really about being present, being engaged. In HR, it's really about what's really important is HR is about people, and so being present, engaged with people, means that you need to be able to listen. You need to be able to pay attention to yourself. You need to be present yourself in the moment, so you can, whether it's about making the right decision, whether it's listening, observing without judgment, you really need to be present. You need to be mindful to be able to do that. Paying attention to your emotions, you need to be able to be calm when you're interacting with others, when you're interacting, and being kind to yourself. There's some key aspects of being mindful to me.
Thank you all so very much. And I would really, I'm still under the joyful influence of the previous conversation when we talked about leading with heart and about storytelling as an underpinning skill for leading with heart. And I would invite you into a small challenge of doing a little bit of storytelling in our panel as well. Could you share with us a story of when you felt at your most present and how that impacted your team and the people around you? And Rod, I would ask you to lead us into this, just mindful of the fact that we didn't have you for the previous two questions.
Sure. When did I feel most present? I think that being most present is something that I'm really focused on probably all the time. I think one of the things, maybe I'll just talk about, so I've mentioned my background with the Air Force, and being present, my background with the Air Force has been with fighter squadrons, with F-18s. And so you can imagine when you're flying an F-18 that you need to be very present. You're making decisions, really, really quick decisions need to happen all the time. And so being mindful is a very key aspect of being able to operate a fighter jet aircraft, and you need to be able to work in a team. So you normally, when you're flying, you're with a group, probably up to 4 aircraft flying very fast together. So being mindful is you need to be ever present to exactly what's going on to the environment, and just, I guess, sharing some little techniques from that experience is really what you focus on to be mindful, to help you be mindful, is just focusing very much on the breath, slowing yourself down so you can be present, making really fast decisions. A key thing as well for being mindful that we'd practice would be just noticing, paying attention to your body. So one thing that is taught is just paying attention to your thumbs. If you just notice your hands now, what people often do when they're feeling tense and you're not mindful and not present is your hands start to get tense and you start to clench your fists. And so that's a really easy technique to bring yourself back to present. And so bringing yourself back to present is just bringing your awareness back into your breath. And that helps you then focus to be there. So that's some story.
Thank you so much, Rod.
Thanks.
Who would like to? It's difficult to to go next after being a mindful leader in the Air Force. Jen, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in here, and I'm seeing Tim's comment, and I kind of want to bring that a little bit into my story, because as a DEI practitioner who also thinks about mindfulness, I think it is really important to recognize who's in the room with you, what are the social and personal identities, in addition to kind of the formal organizational roles that one has. And I think that is a part of mindfulness, and understanding how are you creating the space for those folks to feel a sense of belonging, but also for them to step into what it feels like to be mindful. So back to your question, Manola, around what is a time that I felt most present in my leadership? And as I reflected on that question, I find that the times where I feel like I am most present in my leadership are in times of high tension and low morale within a team. And not to say that I'm not present in those other moments, but I think it's in those moments where I myself am navigating my own tensions, whether that's because of how the team is doing, how my organization is doing, my own, stuff around that, while also taking care of a team. So in this instance, I had a team of 3 other women of color. And I name that because that's important context in an institution, right? When the identities that my team is navigating as a DEI team, and they're feeling a bunch of tensions, they have low morale, they're frustrated, and I myself am too. And so in that moment, what that mindful leadership looked like for me was recognizing I feel tension too, I'm upset too, and I am frustrated as well. How can I best show up for my team, though, that's going to be in service of what we need to do right now? Sometimes that would look like letting them know I'm frustrated too. But there were other moments where I'm like, chiming in and saying I'm frustrated too actually isn't going to be in service of this moment. So, or I need to build on that. I'm frustrated too, but what needs to be true so that we can together work to progress this forward? So do we all need to take a 1 hour break? Those are the spheres of influence that I had as a leader to say, take a break. Nothing will fall apart. Nothing's going to burn down. Take a break, And so what was important for me is that I needed to recognize, where am I in the institution? I'm a leader. I'm a director. I have access to resources. I have the space to control my calendar, but what are the resources that my team has? They're more junior. They don't have the same amount of resources. They don't even have the same amount of information to understand how to navigate certain situations. And as women of color, they're navigating certain things around their personal and social identities as well. And so I need, as a leader, me being mindful in that moment is recognizing the full context of what is happening so that I can best serve myself, right? Because I need to show up for myself so that I can show up for them, but also be best in service of them, because I know that being best in service of this team will be best in service of the work and the organization that we're trying to serve. And so I think that kind of story just came to mind when you asked that question around, like, what are the moments that I felt most present in being a mindful leader?
Thank you. Tomika, I saw you unmuted a while ago.
Yes. I had to think about this for a while, but at a moment where I felt most mindful and most present for my team, I think was probably a couple of years ago, with not only we were in the middle of the pandemic, but then the George Floyd situation had happened, and it really had impacted a lot of people on our team. And there were people who reached out to me privately who were having a lot of concerns. And at that moment, I needed to be present. I need to be empathetic to wherever they were going through, because everybody's situation and how they were responding to this, they were all uniquely different. Being also aware of employer resources that are available to them. How can they use them? What can they gain from using these things? And how can I help them navigate this process of using the tools that are available? Because that actually is not straightforward. And actually just saying, do you want to take the day off today? Do you want to you can actually just clock in your time. And actually just being aware enough to say, no, I think you are going to take the rest of the day off. And you are going to just take a break, and we're going to talk tomorrow. But right now, your stress level is so high that this just isn't good. It's not good for you. It's not good for the team. It's not good for anybody. So go home, just rest. Let's talk tomorrow. Let's see if you feel better. If you don't feel better, let's talk about what we can do for you to help. As a team leader, that's one of the things that you always have to be concerned with. It's just your other colleagues and making sure they're doing okay. I feel that's very important as a leader. And I think that right there was the most important moment where I had to be very mindful of not just myself, but what was happening in America at that time and globally at that time, and then trying to help certain individuals navigate this.
Tammy.
I kind of hinted at it a little bit in my introduction, but I think it bears worth repeating. I grew up my prior life to what I do now in an advertising agency. It's a very fast-paced environment, service-based environment where everything that you do, it's time and materials, bill, lots of pressure. And as a young person, I was very good at my job and I was very driven, results driven. So go, get the things done. And I missed a lot of being present in moments, and a lot of my leadership skills as a young person were lacking because I was so focused on doing the work. I was always 8 steps ahead of everybody else or the things that needed to be done. And that's certainly what made me good as an individual contributor, but not as a leader. So I think my example of what, the most mindful, most present moments was when I realized that the people were far more important than the work output, and the happier and more cared for the people were, the better the quality output. And so really stopping in one-on-ones or in team meetings and really listening, really being thoughtful and intentional with asking, great open-ended questions or probing questions, really taking the time to get to know people at a more granular level and understand what makes them tick, their intrinsic values and motivations, things like that, right? So when I had that switch from got to get the work done, go, to caring and investing in the people and being present in those moments, it was a huge shift for them in their development, their reactions and responses to me as a leader, and their ability to show up how they needed to be healthy and effective. But it also was a huge shift for me and how I felt every day too, and the intrinsic values that I have that maybe I was walking away from. So I share that even though it's not quite exactly answering your question, Manola, because it's more of what I wasn't doing versus what I was doing. But that ability to take that step back and realize, what is the most important thing in your everyday work is what made a significant difference for me in that ability to be mindful and present.
Thank you all so very much. And we are in the second half of our conversation for a few minutes already. And before we have those questions popping up in the comments, I'm just anticipating them. It is being recorded, this panel, and you can always go back and re-listen, or you can recommend the link either from our LinkedIn space or hackinghrlab.io. And the next question is not so much a question, but an invite to put a bit of a different spin to everything that we've already covered. And that is, how can being present help us really understand and evaluate what is impactful for those around us? I just had a look at the title, and it's Strategies for Present and Impactful Leadership. So what is that impactful leadership bit of our conversation? I saw some nodding, so I will just leave that question there, and let's see where inspiration strikes. Tammy.
I'll jump in. I think that presence is really one of the most powerful things that you can do in support of your team to create that biggest impact. And I mentioned it already, but I think your ability to understand people's intrinsic values and motivations, and to really understand who they are as a person, to make a point about, are you upset? You're not having a good day, something's bothering you, right? Like, those things when you're more mindful and present, and you can pick up on them so that you can respond accordingly. And to truly be impactful in your leadership, you have to be able to communicate effectively. You have to be able to get people on board with certain strategies. You have to be able to be responsive and adept to what individuals or the team needs as a whole to be successful. So I really, truly believe that these things go hand in hand, and your ability to understand what's under the surface, which comes through presence and intuition, is what leads to impact.
Jen.
I'll have a go. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
So
go ahead, Rod. We haven't heard from Rod as much. I'll go after Rod.
thank you. So Rod and then
Yes.
Jen.
Sure. Look, I think being present is and being mindful is a vital trait of having impactful leadership. I think the key things of being a leader is about making decisions is one part. So you need to be present to be engaged in the situation, so it can lead to, informed, thoughtful decision making, taking in information from your team or of the situation of the environment. So that's one really important aspect. So effective decision making comes from that. I think another really key thing, being mindful and being present with your team, is that can help increase engagement. So if you're an authentic leader, if you're present for your team, that sets an example. The team will more likely feel more that they belong, that they're accepted, that they can be their best self, they can bring their self to the work situation. So authentic decision making. There's a couple, so I'll let someone else speak. Thank you.
Going back to your question, Manola, too, around what's the relationship really between presence and impactful leadership? I mean, I think first and foremost is recognizing, like, what do we mean by impactful? Because there oftentimes, like, that word in itself is subjective when we talk about leadership. And if I bring it back to, this is Hacking HR, we're talking to HR professionals, we're talking to people, and I bring it back to what might impactful leadership look like there, is that, again, we are in the business of people. And so to be present means to recognize the people aspect of our work, and recognizing that there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of people's emotions. I know you said the last panel was around emotional intelligence, right? There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of feelings. There's a lot of us as people practitioners and HR practitioners managing the expectations and creating the conditions for everyone else to feel those feelings and feel all of those things. And I feel like if we are not present as people leaders, as HR leaders, then our impact in terms of how we are creating those conditions, how we are creating those processes, how we are analyzing the people data, then shifts to not being in service of the people, but being in service of our own triggers, our own things that we're trying to navigate. If we're not present, then we're not aware of that. And if you're not aware of that, then you're not in service of what impact you're actually trying to have, which, again, I would assume as HR leaders is in service of the people, which we know is in service of the organization. So, and the other piece that I was thinking about, which is a little bit of a tangent to your question, Manola, but is that leadership and mindfulness is a practice. There's no place of arrival, right? We say mindful HR leader as a noun, but really it's a verb. It's a moment by moment doing, and there are times where you can be a mindful leader, but you could have a moment where you're not mindful. And so I think that's also an important thing that we need to recognize, that impactful leadership, I think Kristen, who hopped off, said this earlier too, is that being a present, impactful, and a mindful leader is also recognizing when you yourself need the moment. So those were kind of some of the things that were coming up for me as you asked that question, Manola.
Thank you, Jen. Tamika.
As I was thinking about your question and hearing the other people respond, there were just a couple of things that came to my mind. It's a couple of adages that kind of describe what I was thinking. You got to walk the walk and talk the talk, and you have to lead by example. As a leader, you need to be mindful of yourself and present. By showing others that you're being present and being mindful, and you're thinking about ways to make sure your stress is managed, thinking about ways for you to be healthy. By you setting that example for your team and seeing that and having them follow your lead, I think is very, very important. If you're someone who's always stressed out, always yelling, always just on a 10 at all times, that type of impact to your team is just detrimental. So I think being a present leader, a mindful leader, is like paramount to being a good leader to your team and making your team more productive and active and all the other things that businesses need to be successful.
I will take the opportunity created by Shelly, and I see in comments here that a lot of small businesses have been wearing their own HR hats, and are they truly present? So I will build on that, and those of you that we shared panels recently before won't be surprised by this question, because you heard me say that I made a promise to myself, and that is to always create a small space where we can either highlight or add special call outs for people in the audience who live in the reality of an HR function of one. And we are all talking about competing priorities, about increased pressures, about not enough hours in a day and days in a week, and just not enough resources of any kind that we can think of. Now, with all this, back to Jen's point, how can we keep the practice of being a mindful HR leader alive? And extra points for tips for mindful HR leaders of an HR function of one. Who would like to lead this one? Jen.
I'm happy to chime in here, especially because I'm not an HR leader of one, but I am a team of one doing DEI. So very much live in that day-to-day of what it means to be at the high level in the strategy, but also be in the weeds and doing the work. To go back to your question on like, what are some of the strategies of how we can actually practice being a mindful leader? And I think it depends on where you yourself are at with your own mindfulness journey and your own mindfulness journey. So I think for one, just because I saw that question too from Shelly Ann, I think, again, presence, that's subjective. Part of it is for us to know what presence looks like for us, but I think communication is key with your teams as well. And even if you're a person of one, communication, because in an HR function, you are having to collaborate and work with many people across the organization. So communicating to others what your expectations are and what also presence looks like for you, I think creates more resilient relationships, a more resilient collaboration in the moments of tension. And then some tips for, as people are thinking about starting their mindful journey, or, what are some daily practices? I think about, either starting your day off with one practice. I think oftentimes people are like, to be mindful, you have to do meditation. You need to notice your breathing. You need to start your meetings like this. But a great place to start is just starting your day off with one practice of how you can get to know yourself. So that could be an affirmation. That could be a breathing technique. And then the second thing that I would add as a tip is that start to take note of when you are stressed and how you're managing that, and what's coming up for you. And because the more, again, that you are saying, oh, I'm stressed, and let me take pause and understand why am I stressed and how am I managing it? And you don't have to solve for it right away, but just start to take note of what's happening. And the same thing around wow, I'm in a groove. I'm really happy. I'm loving my job. Again, just start to take note. What's happening? What are the conditions? And then as you grow outside of yourself, you can start to name those things for your team. But I think, again, part of being mindful is building out your self-awareness. So again, that you can be present with your teams. But if you are not present with yourself, if you go straight to trying to just solve for your team, you will only be leading from a place of projection. without having to have those tools to manage your own self emotions.
Great tips, Jen. Who would like to add to these? Rod.
I'll have a go. Yeah, I think just, I guess, summarizing what I think I was hearing, I think what's really important is that, you really need to be aware of your own needs, your own well-being when you're a HR professional of one. Balancing your duties with your own personal care is really key, so you avoid burnout. There can be a lot of different things you're dealing with in a HR person of one, from whether it's strategic planning, whether it's, again, I think the question in the chat also talked about, the COVID and the impacts of that. So being aware of what's happening in the environment and acting around that. And that's where, like, there's still a lot of remote work. How does your business need to adjust to that? So dealing with heightened anxieties, they're all really key. So that takes being present, active listening, understanding what's happening, adapting HR policies to what the current reality is a key sort of area as well, to help you when you're a HR function of one. You need sort of policies, procedures, so that things can happen without you needing to be part of every step. I think's really key. And as the HR leader of one, it's really important then that you are someone who can be approachable, responsive. So employees need a leader that can be available for them, who can care, help them. So that's some impact from input from me. So, that's
Thank you, Rod. Tamika, please.
As I was thinking about this question, one of the things that I think is important from some of these mid-sized to larger companies, HR leaders, it is their priority to better understand their employees and what they're going through. This is where engagement surveys become very useful. But not only should you have engagement surveys to kind of better understand where your employees are, you have to come up with a strategy on what you're going to do with that information once you have it. Because if you see certain pockets of your population who seems to struggle, who have mentioned things about the work-life balance or anything like that, how are you going to respond to that in turn? So I think just getting to better understand your employees is a great strategy for your leaders, HR leaders. But then thinking about how you're going to respond once you get these results, I think are just two very important steps that HR leaders can do in helping, to be present and mindful as a leader.
Sammy.
I love that we've had undertones of awareness, seeking to understand, curiosity in the responses thus far. And I would just add to it that I think that there's a direct correlation in your ability to be present, or inverse correlation with your ability to be with busyness and with overwhelm. And when you're an N of one, right, you've got a lot of things on your plate, and it's hard to be present when your competing priorities are, constantly hitting you, or they're in your mind, or you're sitting there in a meeting that feels wasteful when you should be doing something else. And so there's just this constant cycle of, how am I showing up? What am I focusing on in this moment? And I think that's probably the hardest thing when we are in those overwhelmed moments, or being an N of one, or even in a small team, of like, how do I focus and be present when I've got all these other things going on? And so I want to just go get down to brass tacks, right? Is like making a commitment to yourself. This is how I show up in meetings, period. Hard stop, right? Like, I could be multitasking. Yes, I could be doing all these things. However, if I'm going to choose to be in this meeting, then I need to be present and add that kind of value into that meeting, and learning how to then associate that. And I think one thing that I would do, brass tacks again, keep a literal sheet of paper next to me. And anytime I had a thought come in my mind of like, oh, I need to do this thing, or gosh, I forgot about that, or what if such and such, I would write it down so that it was captured and I could still stay present and focus in the moment. And then I think the second part of it is really having a strong prioritization list for yourself. Part of it's certainly, again, like I said, how am I showing up? But what am I focusing on today? and then putting everything else aside so that you can really focus and be present and get the best results for yourself, for your team, for the people around you.
I so loved how we talked about mindful HR leader being a verb and being a journey and being a continuous experience. And the first thing that comes to mind when I think about a journey is learning. But I would love to ask the next question with a little spin to it, because continuous journeys also talk about unlearning. And I am curious, what is one big thing that you had to unlearn as you started being intentional with your presence and you started being a mindful HR leader? And I will just give you a few seconds to think about it. Tomika, I will ask you to lead us into that. But I will just want to open this question to everybody in the audience and to encourage them to drop their own answers. Tomika, what's your biggest unlearning on this mindful HR leader journey?
That you can have two people who are in very similar roles, very similar backgrounds, had very similar work experiences, but they're still two totally different people that respond differently to different situations. And you have to be mindful. One reaction is not right or wrong relative to the other. They're just different reactions, different responses. And this is because of how they grew up, their own, personal journey throughout life that goes beyond college and working and just this job. Once you have a better understand that people have lived a life outside of just the career path, outside of just their college and working, but other things that have happened in their lives, and just getting a better understanding of your employees in general. And that has probably been one of the biggest unlearning things I've seen. Everybody is just uniquely different in how they respond to certain things. And the unlikeliest reaction that you get from one person can be quite, very surprising, because you would have this stereotype of what you think this person should be doing and performing and acting. But then when you start talking to them, communicating with them, really getting to understand where they're coming from, you understand this whole layer underneath them that you just never expected before.
Thank you so much, Tomika. Rod.
One significant thing for me personally has just been dealing with the habit of multitasking, trying to, in the context of personal interactions. And I'll just start with a little story. I mentioned before my background in the Air Force. Very early in my career, prior to mobile phones and things like that, I was in my office and I was talking to my boss, and the old phone type, the phone rang, and I answered the phone and started talking on the phone, and boy, did my ear get chewed off after that. And I think that taught me a lucky lesson, very early, that when you're present with someone, you need to be present. So you shouldn't be checking emails, which is very easy to do. So it's really important to give the full attention to who you're with, who you're speaking with, without distraction. So I'm very conscious when I go into meetings just not to have my phone with me, because it's just so easy to be so distracted with that. And that all stems back to a lesson that I learned 30 years ago.
Thanks. You. Jen.
One place that myself, I think over time, but also I see in the capacity I serve in, a lot of leaders need to unlearn is that leadership equals all knowing. And I think that is true for mindful leadership too. And that the unlearning is that if you don't know the answer, if you need time, if you are stressed out and you need a moment, that leadership, it's kind of full circle, means modeling that behavior as well. That leadership doesn't mean that you have to know everything and every answer and all of the information, and that being present and mindful in your leadership means that you know, okay, I need a moment here too. And I think a lot of leaders, I find, need to unlearn that. Again, if you don't know, doesn't mean that you're not a good leader.
Thank you. Tammy.
I love that, Jen. The vulnerability in leadership is great. I think the biggest thing I had to unlearn growing up was kind of what I've already, I feel like I'm kind of just sharing different versions of the same story, but I had to unlearn that busyness or doing was my only source of value. And especially as leaders, you know, when we're at higher levels of overseeing and strategic and whatever, you have to learn that the to-do list is not necessarily your best place to focus.
Thank you all so very much. This has been a treat. We will have a very, very short one word when we think about mindful HR leader, especially after our conversation today. What is one word that comes to mind? We will do this counterclockwise. So we will start with Ron, but I will just want to say a big, big thank you to everybody in the audience for being here, to Jessa, to Enrique for making this happen. One word, mindful HR leader. Rod.
Empathetic.
Thank you. Tamika.
You stole my word. Empathetic. Same thing.
Jen.
Intentional.
And Tammy.
Calm.
Wonderful. Tammy, Jen, Tamika, Rod, what a treat and what a gift. And also Kristen, so sorry we only had her for a couple of minutes. Have a wonderful rest of your day, of your week, of your month, and of your year. And I hope I will get to welcome as many of you as possible tomorrow. Thank you.